Well, it's almost 9:05 Central Time. Let's go ahead and get this meeting started. And good morning, everyone. This is Mr. Rob from Ladder. And Rob, go ahead and take it away.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for jumping on today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick here because I got a presentation to walk through some of this stuff here. All right. So, like I said, first off, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm very excited to be speaking with you all, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know everyone's kind of closing out January and getting ready to, take on February and really kill it there. So, I appreciate you jumping on today. So. Like Jump here said, my name is Rob Oxenford. I am with Ladder Life. And I wanted to kind of go through a little housekeeping stuff real quick, just because this comes up on quite a few presentations. And so I just want to make sure I address it. If anyone on the call did have a prosperity contract, that did not come over to Ladder. So you will need to get reset up with Ladder. You can reach out to obviously your upline agents first so they can get that set up for you. But you will need to get a new appointment set up with Ladder. But with that, that also means if you had any, say, debit balance or anything set up with Prosperity, that did not come over to us. So we're not holding commissions or anything like that. If you do have a debt balance and need to step a payment plan, you'll have to reach out to them individually. So just want to make sure that was aware there. So also, like Jump here said, I want to make sure you're getting all the information you need to be successful with Ladder. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, always feel free to just put them down in the comment section and we'll get through all of them at the end of the talk here. So with that, let's get into the presentation here. So I know this isn't new for anyone on the call here, but the life insurance market is huge. Let's be honest. It's 4 times as more life insurance policies are sold than mortgages each year in the US, right? Also, consumer demand is high. 93% of adults think the primary wage earner needs life insurance. One thing I've been in insurance now for life insurance now for about 25 years. And one thing I've always said is that life insurance doesn't have a PR problem; it has an execution problem. One thing we always find when someone passes away, one of the first questions they always ask, like, did they have life insurance? I always feel like people understand the power that life insurance has to help the family, help loved ones, everything after someone's passing. It's just kind of getting them through that process, getting them into underwriting, getting throughout the other side, and that's really where we come in. Also, we see about roughly 40% of Americans actually do leave a financial burden for their loved ones when they pass away. So that's why life insurance is so powerful. Also, about 100 million Americans think they are underinsured or uninsured. That's about 33% of the population fall into that, right? But the interesting thing about that is when we've done, LIMRA and Best Life Rates, and everyone has done different polls, they always find about 50% of people said they'd be more likely to buy life insurance if they didn't have to do the medical exam. So that's one thing we really focus on here at Ladder. Because as we know, the traditional life insurance process can be long, especially when you start getting to that multi-million-dollar policies, you start getting over $1 million. There's a lot of things that come into play with that, from paperwork, phone calls, doctor visits, and so on. That really kind of stretches that out anywhere from, say, a month to 3 months to get to that process. I even had one that went 6 months back when I was selling. So, that process can be long, and that's why we want to make sure that we're creating an experience where we kind of remove those barriers to make it as quick and easy for a client to get set up. So a couple things we'll go through today, obviously introductions, or we did that. I'm Rob. We'll go overview of Ladder, who we are. We'll do kind of go over Ladder for independent agents. Also, how to get in touch with us if you have any questions in that Q&A at the end. So nice and simple, right? So kind of why Ladder? Start off there. Like I said, we have a seamless online application process. Generally, if a client comes in from seeing the quote to having a bound policy, going through that and everything takes on average about 5 minutes, kind of with the process of how they're kind of typing speed, right? But also we've been able to even reduce that more as we've introduced agent assisted applications. So you can actually fill out a lot of information when you're talking to the client and then pass it over to them. So we've been able to make that even quicker. We do coverage all the way from 100,000 up to 8 million. But for that fully digital experience we're going to focus on today, that's where we're going to see kind of 3 million and below is where you're going to fall in that. So that's what we're really going to be talking about today. That instant decision is really what's key. We want to make sure that the clients is getting the policy in place so they've got the coverage as soon as possible. With that, we find about 70% of the policies that come through us go straight to the instant decision, have a decision at the end. About 20% do get referred to our underwriting team just for some further review. And then we have about 10% that do that decline. But we're always trying to reduce that decline. And we're going to be coming out with some pieces here soon. We'll be sending out to each and every one of you to review, to kind of help you kind of do some pre-screening before someone jumps that process to kind of gate that. So also we do laddering. It's in the name, right? I'll kind of go over what that is, about showing how we can increase and decrease coverage to make sure we're really meeting the client's needs throughout the life of the policy. So on the laddering side of things, one thing we find with clients, as you guys know, when you're talking to people, needs change. The policy they bought 30 years ago, the policy they bought, heck, even maybe 2 years ago, might not be able to fit the needs they need right now. In this particular graph we're kind of showing here, someone bought a $500,000 policy. A little while later, they have a first child, and they need to increase that coverage. And then a second child comes along. Overall, these needs are going to be changing throughout a person's life, and we want to make sure we're accommodating that. We've got different ways we can do that, add additional policies and so on. But with laddering, one thing we want to do is make sure they can stay within that ecosystem. They've already got a policy set up and how they can make changes to that to not only change their needs, but also change their budget. So let's focus on the budget one first, and I'm going to actually go on laddering down. The idea here is that someone purchased a policy right when they've got, 2 kids at home and a house and everything. So they bought a $1 million policy for $32 a month. Now, as time goes, they're very budget conscious people, and they want to make sure that they're, it's fitting within their budget and they're saving where they can. So after 5 years, that mortgage has, reduced a bit. They can reduce the policy. Kid turns 18, leaves the house. They can reduce that again because that responsibility might not be on their plate anymore. Then higher education gets paid off on this 20-year policy. They were able to save, over $3,600 on that savings. Now you can see how they're kind of decreasing. This is the conversation. This really kind of gives an idea if someone's like, well, I'm going to drop this policy, kind of a way to kind of save that to stay in place. But if I'm being completely honest, from an agent's perspective, if I've got someone set up with $1 million, I'm probably not going to have them move too far off that, because I want to make sure. I've never had anyone say they had too much life insurance at the end, and they've already had that secured. I'd probably keep them in line with that, right? But we also do have the other direction, and that's laddering up. And I feel like this is probably the scenario we run into more and more when talking with clients. When we're doing reviews, we're talking to them about, what's changed over the last year, what's changed over the last 5 years, new baby, new house, raise, so on. And having that conversation of coming in at this one, for instance, was $200,000. I had that initial policy coverage, but obviously a new baby comes along. Raises, everything, they're going to increase the overall amount of coverage they need. Even inflation will affect some of this. But we want to make sure we're keeping that top of mind when, for instance, a raise, that income replacement is huge. How we need to adjust that. What are new debts that's taken place? And we can actually add to the ladder policy throughout the entire process to actually see that increase in premium to make sure we're keeping them in line and kind of coverage they need at that time and place in life. So. Also, kind of said why ladder. It's kind of just a brief overview of the exact product. It is a term product, so not a whole lot of bells and whistles around, which is nice. So every wallet, like I said, we do 100,000 all the way up to 8 million. But for that fully digital experience, it's 3 million and below. So you just want to keep that in mind. If you do have a client that comes to that 3 million and they said, hey, I want to increase coverage, obviously there's some additional underwriting around that. We do offer 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30-year options. We also have competitive pricing with no policy fees. And then we also have that 30-day free look period, like most companies. A couple things to keep in mind, though. We do have what we call our 70 rule here. So we have issue through ages 20 to 60. For our policies. But that 70 rule, what that means is that as a 60-year-old, if I was purchasing a ladder policy, the only option I have is a 10-year option. If I was 40, I have the 10, 15, 25, all 30, all the flavors are available for me there. And also one thing to kind of keep in mind here when it comes to ladder is that from a commission standpoint, it's all the same. Whether you're selling the 10-year or the 30-year, it's the same commission. If they're 20 years old or 60 years old, it's the same commission. We only have one commission for all of our products, all of our lengths of term. Just try to keep it as simple as possible when it comes to our products. So we do that digital real-time underwriting. Like I said, 3 million and below. I think I've said like 60 times here. So sorry about that. Also, we do have a wide variety of underwriting classes. You'll find a lot of times when people are looking at speed, one thing they'll start to limit very quickly is the underwriting availability, and it'll kind of either be like a black box of yes or no. With us, we do offer all the way from Preferred Plus down to Table 8 for our Excel process. So they can fall in that kind of very wide swath of available coverages for them. So, and then also
Rob,
that laddering feature. Yeah.
Rob, give me 1 second. Explain, and I like to like make sure agents know, because you just said
Yeah.
something that most agents aren't aware of. You said
Mhm.
Table 8. Explain
Yeah.
what that means in table ratings. So just really quick
Sure.
so they have an idea.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, when you look at overall underwriting, you've got your preferred plus, your preferred, and then your standard. Standard is your standard risk. That is what majority of the population is actually going to fall in, and a lot of products are built off that. When you look at standard risk, though, people may have something that comes up in their medical history, or even driving, or something comes up with medication they're taking, where may cause them to be an additional risk above standard. And so a table rating, really what it is you've got everywhere from table 1, table 2, table 3, table 4, all the way down to table 8. And what that is really just kind of taking the premium up, kind of up higher, really, to offset that overall amount of risk they have. So you might have someone who comes in who as opposed to say like you had two people coming in, one is a standard risk, and they might be at say like $100. Well, this person might end up having managed diabetes and maybe also a heart condition or something that might take them up to say like a table 5 or something like that. So overall, these individuals are same age, but they are different risks for the company on that life expectancy. So that table rating, they're going to probably be at maybe 200 or more dollars a month versus the $100. And once again, it's just more, it's adding that additional cost as opposed to say like a flat extra or something like that. That table rating is just going to be increasing up. The reason I mentioned that, and the reason that is key, is because you will find a lot of times with companies that have accelerated processes, they won't go beyond standard. It's usually we'll do preferred or standard. If they don't fall into one of those two, it's a no-go. For us, we do go below that. Because we know people are going to have things come up. One thing I always say about medicine is that we've cured a bunch of things the last couple of years, right? But at the same time, we've also been able to identify stuff a lot early. So we're starting to find people who have more conditions that are coming up. So you want to make sure you're aware of those and that they can still get the coverage they need. And that's where that kind of table rating comes into play. So, yeah, good question too, by the way. I had to go back to
Well,
my life insurance
well,
test
Rob,
days.
what I wanted to do is I didn't want to be the boring one, so I wanted you to explain it. I'm just kidding. I just don't want to, you're the key player today, so you're gonna explain it. But yeah,
Oh yeah,
table
yeah, no
ratings,
problem, no problem.
table rating guys, and just so you're aware, table ratings are all very similar with all the insurance companies. Now, just so you know, um, they all based their table ratings off of how long people actually live based off of their
Hmm.
health screening. A
Hmm.
diabetic is not going to live as long as someone who doesn't have diabetes.
Hmm.
Someone who has a heart condition is not going to live as long as someone who does not. So what they do is they don't deny those people. They just charge a higher premium, just a little bit, to cover that cost of the risk.
Hmm.
So that's why I wanted you guys to be aware of the table ratings, but they're all very similar. And thank
Yeah,
you for clarifying, Rob. Thank you so much, sir.
yeah, no problem whatsoever. Yeah, it's like I said, it's good to know because um, when you have people falling into that, I always say also if someone has a table rating and pop up, I'm a big fan of taking that policy right away. Even if you can start looking around, because you always have a 30-day free look period, but also you don't know if another company might see that it's even more of a risk and might decline them. So you want to get that policy in place. So just something to keep in mind there. When it comes to art, like I said, product details, not whole lot. So one thing I love about term, annual fee 0. Things to keep in mind though is from an eligibility standpoint, they must be a U.S. citizen physically located in the U.S. Or a resident who's been here for 2 years, but also must be located in the U.S. That 100K to 8 million, that 30-day free look period. Now, issue age, this is one thing I do want to make a point of. That issue age is 20 to 60. And something that we might be a little different than other companies is we do go to nearest age and not attained age. So as an example, if someone was, say, 50 years old and 185 days, they're going to be a 51-year-old in our system. So it's something to keep in mind as you're kind of quoting people and looking at on kind of where they're going to hit on that spectrum. From a payment method, we do accept debit and credit card. So if someone wants to get points, we have ACH. We also take Apple Pay and Google Pay. So we take about every option to really kind of make sure this is going as fast as possible for people. Premiums, we do monthly and obviously level premium. One thing I also point out, we don't do replacements. And the reason for that is because our process is so quick, we aren't able to kind of facilitate those. So just something to keep in mind, because that question will come up very quickly in the application of, is this replacing your current policy? You need to make sure you know to get the policy through there. A couple states we don't write in are Connecticut and New York. So if you are located in those states, sorry. We do obviously turn lengths that said 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30-year options. Then going back to, like I said, the different underwriting classes, we do offer both tobacco and non-tobacco rates. And we go from preferred plus all the way down to table 8. So definitely something to keep in mind when you're looking at the quotes at the end there. Underwriting process, obviously application questions. We do third-party evidence checks. So we're checking MID, RX records, driving records, criminal record, things like that all come in. Those are all reviewed, and then an instant offer for those who qualify. Also, I'm going to go into this a little bit later, but one thing we did just roll out here, gosh, I want to say maybe a week ago. It's very, very new for us, is we are now adding a terminal illness to this rider, terminal illness rider. The nice thing about this is that this point going forward, if they qualify for the product, they will get this rider attached to it. It will free up about 95% of the death benefit for those who do activate the rider because a terminal illness has been identified. It currently says not available California, Florida, and South Carolina. We are in the process of still getting approval in those states. So definitely watch your email because we'll be reaching out to Agent First to pass it on to make sure that you guys are aware when that does come available in those states because it just brings a little more value to the overall product. And we also are working on some additional riders that should be coming available later this year. So we'll make sure you guys are aware of that as well, because it's going to be pretty exciting having those. Because those really, the way those are set up is that they won't affect the premium or anything like that. It's just built into the product there. Okay, underwriting guidelines. These are things that we want to make sure people are aware because there can be more on the kind of knockout side of things. We are in the process of creating a really comprehensive underwriting guide, so we'll be getting that out to you here in the next couple of weeks as well. But some things to keep in mind if you are talking to a client before putting them through the ladder process is, one of the things we want to make sure if they've got severe uncontrolled blood pressure, if they're not on any medications for it, anything like that, that more than likely would be a decline. From a BMI standpoint, if they're under 18% or above 40%, and if you're kind of wondering how to calculate that, if you just Google BMI calendar, we're going to fall right in there. So you want to make sure they're in that range. Cancer within the last 10 years, that one comes up quite a bit. It does exclude skin cancer because I think we see that more than often. Also, chronic hepatitis or kidney diseases would be a knockout. Also, criminal history, if they have a felony or misdemeanor convictions, that's a big question mark. If it's recently within the last probably 7 years or so, it's definitely going to be a knockout, but something to keep in mind. Also, diabetes. I know I mentioned this, severe uncontrolled diabetes. That is something that's going to have a big effect on this. So you want to make sure that they are on metformin or something like that to control that, or diabetes with complications. Drugs and alcohol, if they do use illegal drugs or have had drug abuse treatment or anything like that in the last 10 years, that will be a knockout. And then marijuana, that's one of those things I'd like to address because that greater than 12 times a month. So if you have someone who is say a social user, depending on what state you live in, obviously it's legal in a lot of places now. If they're a social user, I know some guys who, smoke up on the golf course, stuff like that, that's perfectly fine. It's more to kind of identifying those people that are using it often enough, daily or multiple times a day where they can almost take it beyond what a smoker rate would be. So we want to keep that in mind there. Heart conditions, if they've had a significant heart condition, including a heart attack, want to watch out for those. Also, DUI or reckless driving or suspended license, that will also be a knockout. Also stroke in the past 10 years, that is something you want to ask too. And then also plan travel to a risky country in the next 2 years. And the question will specifically ask that about kind of where they're going and so on if they are leaving. So, also other conditions, AIDS, HIV, Alzheimer's, Huntington's disease, Parkinson's disease, things like that are going to be knockouts as well. So,
Rob, let's pause here for just one. can we
Yeah,
pause here for just 1 second? Can we go
of
back to the
course.
last slide? Okay,
Yeah.
guys, this is very important. So
Mhm.
I know a lot of you guys are new, which I'll explain, as we get
Hmm.
going along here. Ladder, they are providing a term policy. Now, a term policy will have higher underwriting guidelines, meaning your client can't be as unhealthy as final expense policies like what I typically sell. So if you guys have questions before you even put them through an application, just send me a text on GroupMe. If he's had a heart attack in the last 2 years, they're not going to qualify. Stroke in the last 2 years, not going to
Mhm.
qualify. Highly, complications from diabetes, not going to qualify. Neuropathy, probably not going to qualify. COPD, not going to qualify. So these policies are more for people who have a cleaner bill of health. Now, I'm
Mhm.
not telling you not to apply, but just to save the client some time, if you're unsure, just shoot me a text or send a message on GroupMe, and I'll say, hey, they might not be a good fit for a term policy. Sir.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's great, John Pierre. One thing I always say is, when you are talking with a client and you're setting up coverage, you always want to manage expectations. And if you can avoid them having to go through, a decline process or anything like that, you want to be sure to do that. So, like John Pierre said, there's going to be certain products that are going to be perfect for some people and not great for others, and that's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean you can't get them coverage; it just means you want to be selective on where you're sending them. So, yeah, great point. Great point. I appreciate that. On the next one here on the agent process. Now, this is where we get a lot of questions. And I know I'm actually going to touch on something Jane asked me to touch on this process too. From the agent process, like I said, if we need to get you appointed, you want to reach out to agent first. So they can send you their distinctive link that will get you set up with them. And once you're set up with them, you'll actually have access to a system we call Benchmark. It's a dashboard where you'll be able to, view your commissions, your contract, everything like that. But up in the right-hand corner, when you first log in there, you'll see a green button that says New Application. On that one, it will pop down. It will say Ladder Term Life. Click on that, and that will actually take you over to the ladder side of things. On that, you'll have a ladder dashboard where you'll be able to kind of monitor business, run quotes, do applications, everything like that. But once you're into ladder dashboard, you want to click on Application, and this is where you can generate a quote. Now, this is important, obviously, because we want to make sure it's quick as possible. We're going to have some changes to this process here in probably the next month or so, but it will still be very similar to that. We're just going to add some additional questions to help with kind of pre-screening on the process. But really what we're looking for here is kind of male, female, date of birth, because we're going to have the nearest age there. So we want to make sure we have that in. Height and weight, tobacco, and then also, biological partner or siblings diagnosed with any of these, cancer, diabetes, heart disease prior to age 60. So I want to make sure you include that. Then you can choose your face value, and then also between that 10 and 30-year options, and it will generate the quote. Now, this is kind of where it has a little change in kind of how you're actively kind of engaging with the client. If you're running the quote, and let's say you're going to send it to them because you met with them earlier, but you're not on the phone with them or anything like that, you can actually email the quote to the client. By clicking on the email, it will generate that person into your contacts. But then also, they'll receive an email saying, your agent Rob has prepared a quote for you. Here's the dollar amount. Here's the overall premium for it. So they can see that. And then they have two options after that. They can reach back out to you saying, hey, Rob, this looks great. I'm going to go with it. Or they can actually go into the application process themselves. They can actually click start application and just go right into it and start working it. But if you're talking to the client on the phone and you want to make sure it's not something in their hands, that's the way to say it. Once they see the quote, you can actually start the application, click that, and you can go right into it and start filling out those questions for them and asking them questions actively on the phone or at the meeting or on Zoom or kind of however you're set up with that. Some of this information will come over from the quote to kind of pre-populate part of the application. So, name, obviously I put address and stuff in there, a social security number and phone number. Very quick, basic identification information, and then it will go into the health questions. And a lot of the health questions are going to be generated around kind of that underwriting we were just talking about, kind of where they land on that spectrum. Also have some questions like this in the next 2 years. They plan on doing any skydiving or race car, motorcycle racing, or anything like that. You can go through those. But once you're completed through the entire process and have answered all the questions with the client, and also, one thing I would point out, you can leave and come back to this. It will save wherever your last question you answered. That way it'll kind of stay in that process in case you got to walk away or anything like that. But once you finish the application, you'll actually be able to send it to the client. You'll click the button saying, send Rob his email to take a look at this. He'll be able to pull it up, see all the questions, all the inputs you put in there in one thing, and actually e-sign the application at that point. At that point, it'll actually do the underwriting, which takes about 30 seconds for our accelerated process. And then it will actually generate an offer. But the offer, key point here, it will actually go to you. That way you can see it to kind of see if you needed to make any adjustments. If they were like, hey, I can only spend, $100 a month, you can change that decrement if you need to make sure it's fitting as $100 a month if they happen to get rated up, kind of like a table rating, like we mentioned. You can kind of play with that a bit. But after you've had a chance to review it, you can send it to the client for them to actually review that offer and then actually insert the payment information to get the policy in force. Now, like I said about the dashboard, when you do log in there, you will be able to see all of your clients in there. Unfortunately, all of them are named Jackson Ray on this one, but you get the idea. Each one will be in there and they'll be able to see where they're at in the process. If you sent the application to them and they haven't signed yet, if they have, you sent them a quote and they haven't say moved past that, or if they have an offer and haven't responded to it and so on. And the reason this is important is this does give you a bit of a kind of follow-up here. You can kind of walk down going through like, hey, these people got their offer, I sent it over 2 days ago, they haven't finished the process, I need to follow up with them. They will be receiving emails from us. We do send out emails to both the agent and the clients throughout that entire process to make sure they are aware, so you don't always have to log into your dashboard. But the client will also be getting kind of bump notifications saying, hey, an offer was sent to you, do you have any questions, and so on, just to make sure that they're getting everything they need to make that decision to get the policy in force. Like I said, this page really will give you the ability to kind of see where those people are at. You can click into the application and see, if it was declined, underwriting review, and so on, give you kind of status. And you kind of see at the bottom here a little bit more detailed on kind of where they're at in that process. But this is one thing I wanted to bring up because Jane had mentioned it. One thing we do offer when you're set up with Ladder is we do have what we call a referral link. And what this link is I'm a fan of, if I'm fishing, to have more lines in the water than I have hands, right? So from the referral link, what this is a link that's distinctive to you. So if I have a link in here, it's Rob's link. And this is the link you can put in an email signature, you can put on social media. If you have a website, you can use it there. It's a link that gives people the ability to click on. It will take them specifically to a site that's connected to you within the Ladder. At that point, they can quote, they can fill an application, they can get a policy in force if they like, and all the commissions and everything go back to you. This link, like I said, is great for if you just want to have it in the bottom of your signature. If someone's looking at your email at 2 a.m. and want to click in there and take a look, they can do that. Now, also, Jane did ask about QR codes. We do not currently generate QR codes, but there are a lot of systems online that will generate a QR code for you. And you can actually utilize that link, put it into the generator, and it will generate the QR code there. So that's something kind of maybe in the future, but right now we don't. But that link is kind of crucial as just kind of having another feeler out there, like I said, another fishing line that someone might bite onto at any point. So, and when that person fills out, it does also show up on your dashboard, so you can see that to make sure you're tracking it if they got into the application and stopped and so on. Couple things to keep in mind here. This is the I kind of feel like a pharmaceutical commercial at the end here. Jump here said about the boring part. This is the part that is. No solicitation in Connecticut or New York. Clients must physically be in Washington, D.C. or any state in the U.S. Except New York and Connecticut. Agent must be licensed in the jurisdiction in which they solicit. So just make sure you're licensed in the state that you're actively selling. Agent staff cannot translate Ladder information into any other language and may only advertise, market Ladder or Ladder qualified products in English. And that kind of goes back to just how we are filed in the States with the English application there. Agents must use only approved materials in the original format to market and advertise this product. Really, with that one thing, if you do want to do some marketing with it, definitely reach out to Darren, John Pierre, or myself just before you do, just to make sure we can kind of compliance take a look at or something like that. And we do have a compliance guide on the agent dashboard you can click and look through too. Refer to the policy for applicable exclusions and limitations, and then review the compliance manual for additional information, like I mentioned. Also on our terminal illness rider, lots of text on these, isn't it? The rider allows the acceleration of 90% of the death benefit in the event the insured has a terminal illness while the rider is in force. And one thing is kind of terminal illness definition. If they're seeing when they're seeing their doctor will be able to give them that actual diagnosis. But basically, what it means that their death is within the next 12 months. Is kind of the best way to think about it. What a terminal illness rider does, it gives them access to that death benefit because they're going to have medical bills. They're going to have things that are coming up at kind of that end of life. And so this gives them the ability to access 95% of it to make sure that that's being met. So 95% client may only request acceleration once under the rider. But if they're diagnosed with illness, it generally is only happening once as well. The rider will include for all policies where the insured has a rating class of standard or better. So that's something to keep in mind too. We talked about table ratings earlier. If they are below standard, this rider will not be attached to it. But standard and better, it's automatically attached to the policy, so they won't. It'll just come as part of it in their policy docs. Here's we have a little quote from a financial planner up in Massachusetts. Traditional life insurance applications are slow and painful, so clients would sometimes drag out the process or worse, even fail to implement my life insurance recommendations. Ladder enables a client to seamlessly apply and have insurance in force in minutes, which enables us to focus our time and energy on other parts of our financial plan. One thing I always say when it comes to life insurance, especially when you're working with clients, one of the things, the quicker you can get them through the process, the more likely they're going to stay in the process. But also the quicker they get through, the more likely you can start focusing on the next client. And that's really what we want to help you with our process. But getting in touch with us. Jean-Pierre said, always feel free to reach out to Jean-Pierre or Darren. But if you do want to reach out to any of us here at Ladder, we do have Charles Bernance. He's number one with the beard there. We had Jack Heller and myself. We are the kind of IMO contact team. So if you have any questions or you have anything going on with the application, always feel free to reach out to us. Our individual emails are up there. But the top one up there, it says IMO agent help at ladderlife.com. That's really the one I would say to use because that goes to all three of us. So kind of who's ever not in a meeting, whoever can get back to you as soon as possible. And then we also have that toll-free number. You can always feel free to reach out to us on that as well. If you are looking for some one-on-one kind of training going through Ladder, we do have that Calendly link at the bottom there, calendly.com. I know it's kind of on a slide, so it's hard to get to. So probably the best thing to do is just email us at imoagenthelp@ladderlife.com and we can get you set up to have a conversation with us. So I think the next one is Q&A. So I'm actually just going to go back. So I'll leave that contact information up to make sure we have those. And so let me, get into the questions here. Let's see here.
So guys, if you guys have any questions, please raise your hand and feel free to ask your question to Rob. Well, I'll ask the first question, Rob.
Yeah, go for it.
It feels like I've been doing insurance forever. Okay, well, David Gravel, go ahead, David, unmute. You're fine.
David.
Yeah, just wanted to know if you make those slides available. I was furiously grabbing screen captures, but I think the presentation was very helpful. So thanks. For that,
no
Rob.
problem. Yeah, I will actually send it over to Darren, so he has it and he can pass it out to everyone else. I'll send over, it'll be a PDF, and so you can just kind of look at all of them. No problem whatsoever. Yeah, that's very easy. Let me make a note of that too.
Can you include me in that email, Rob, so I can send it to everyone? It's Jane.
Oh, of course. Yep, Jane, I definitely can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that right after we finish up. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the question I have for you, Rob, since I feel like I've been doing this for 1 billion years now, why should our agents use Ladder over other companies? What do you think?
Sure.
I know why. I like you guys. Go ahead.
For me, well, I think that's the biggest key there. Like I said, as long as I remember when I first wrote my first policy back in, January 2000. So it's been years now. When I wrote that first policy, it was a front and back application. I mean, literally, that's what it is. I filled it out. It was done, and I went on. But over the years, as we've gotten more and more in depth and more coverage and more risk and everything like that, it's really kind of expanded the overall process. Not to mention the overall underwriting, that even if you had someone who was, say, looking for $100,000, there was going to be a pyramid involved. There was going to be a lot of time that's actually spent where a lot of times clients are going to fall off. I know how many times over the years I've had a client who's setting up a paramed and they just never return the paramed's number to get that appointment set up. So really what we're doing here is trying to focus on what are information that we can assume from questions we're asking. What are things that we know from medical records through our modeling where someone's going to land on that scale, to just moving through the process quicker. People are busy, simple as that. I mentioned about sending that quote out and having the ability to, or even using that link where people can quote themselves and so on. The amount of times we've had clients kind of hitting our system on an agent's link and so on at, say, 11 o'clock at night because they finally got the kids to bed and their husband and wife are finally sitting there and they kind of fill it out and get a policy in place. It's astronomical because they have so many times that they're trying to fit it into their schedule, and we're all busy, especially your clients. And I think that's one thing I really focus on here is that when you're having a conversation, especially with the agent assisted app, if you're talking to a client and you can ask those questions and get the application filled out and get a decision while they're there on the phone, that they can just put in their payment information and be done with it. And then they got the coverage from that day forward. That's huge. That's huge. So that's one thing I would say we stand apart in the fact that we really try to be as fast as possible for your clients. And like you said, Jump here, there are some things, there are going to be some restrictions. There's going to be some things where, Ladder's going to be a great fit for them from that speed standpoint, but they may have a medical issue where you might need to look at someone else, and that's perfectly fine. The key is getting that coverage in place, having that conversation, having an understanding of what the client needs, and we're part of that puzzle, is by the way I always say it. So, yeah.
I definitely agree. And for all the agents that are new on here, just remember, the better, you don't want to spend too much time in the application process because you can lose a lot of clients. You want to spend time developing that relationship with that client, talking about their grandkids. Hey, did you get your policy in the mail? How the grandbaby's doing? These are the conversations you want. So when he mentioned the paramed, the first thing I thought of, like many times where I have lost people through paramed, through big policies, through other companies. So it's good that we have a company. Number one, most companies don't go up to 3 million simplified issue. Most will go to 1 million or 2 million. So that's a benefit. I didn't know you guys go up to 3 million, so that's a good thing. So if you have this is how I'm going to use Ladder for a lot of the people, like the working professionals that you might know who have a higher income between 20 to 60. I would show them Ladder because most companies are not going to go up to the 3 million mark without that paramed. And most people don't want to do a paramed. I don't want a nurse, come checking me out and needles and all this other stuff. So Ladder has made it very easy, and I'm impressed with you guys. So thank you for coming on here to really explain everything. Do we have any other? I don't know if there's
like
a delay.
Ben. Yeah, Ben Jenkins has a question.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, Rob, on the activities question, are you planning on any of these planning on doing any of these activities in the next 2 years? If they check yes to any of those, what's that do?
Generally, I will be completely honest with you. If they check yes to any of those, it more likely will be a decline, depending on the activity. But one thing I always say, and this is one of those weird things about insurance, is that nothing really kind of stands alone. So if someone happens to click that, hey, I'm going to plan on going skydiving in the next 2 years, I answer no to every question, and I should be like a preferred plus, but that more likely it might take me down to a standard risk. But if I click that plus, I'm on that foreman and I'm on, say, like 3 or 4 other things, you might see it more being a decline. I always say it's kind of one of those like a point system, if you want to think of that, as you kind of go through, as you have more and stuff. That's just something that added. If it's the only thing they have, if someone's a marathon runner that loves skydiving, they're probably fine. They would probably just see it not being a preferred plus, more probably a standard rating. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Actually, I do have a little story about that since we were talking about being new. I had a client once where I filled out an application, everything like that, and then I sent her off, and she had a paramed. This was before I, had Ladder or anything like that, and it came back that she had an exclusion for being a pilot. And I was like, she's not a pilot. So I reached out to her and I was like, Holly, what are you talking about here? She goes, well, they said if I do in the next 2 years and I don't want to limit my options. I'm like, Holly, today, are you a pilot? That's what they want to know. If in the future you feel like becoming a pilot a year from now, that's fine. Today, are you going to plan on getting your pilot's license? No. Okay.
That's pretty funny. And you know, there's different types of insurance policies for pilots who are active commercial
Yes.
pilots. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And those usually
Mm-hmm.
will require full MIB and medical, but there's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
stricter guidelines for that.
Yeah, and that's one
Um,
thing I've already been passionate about the independent agent channel is because you do have multiple carriers you're working with that, you know, you can find the best fit for your clients. You know, you're really bringing something that, you know, as a standalone, if someone's only selling ladder, you know, that'd be limited. But if you're selling multiple, you have that ability to really find the right product for them, like a pilot policy and stuff like that. So,
that's very
Kenny, I see you
true.
got your hands up there.
Yeah, how you doing? I had a question regarding
Yeah.
somebody who works outside of the US for
Mhm.
extended period of time. Like I have a client that works for the government and she's out of the country for like 6 months out of the year. Not at one time. It's in
Mhm.
like 30 to 90-day chunks. And I've been having a heck of
Sure.
finding something for her, man. So I wasn't sure if this is a product that would be.
That one would be difficult because there is that question that's going to ask, you know, are they going to be going outside of the US in the next, I think it's like 24 months or something like that. She would have to answer yes to that. And then there would be a drop down. And depending on where she's going is probably going to be the biggest factor with that. You know, if she's working with the government, if she's only going to, like, say, like London, probably not an issue. But, you know, if she is in a country where there might be a higher risk for her being there, that's probably going to be a decline on our side. So, yeah, that's a tough one to find sometimes. So, yeah,
So
sorry.
does that also
Okay.
include people who go on vacations?
Yes. So I'll ask the question. So that kind of applies to them too. If they're planning on, you know, going, say like safari or something like that, where they're putting them at risk, that will be a factor. But like I said, it's one of those things that's just part of the overall process. They're going to look at that. They're going to look at a lot of things. But if someone is going overseas in the next 2 years, you know, I fall into that. I'm going to be out of the country here in like 3 months for vacation, so I fall into that as well. So just something to keep in mind as you're filling out that application. So,
If you say no on that and they do go out of country, would they just not pay it or?
with that, obviously, most life insurance policies have a 2-year kind of review process. If anyone passes away in that first 2 years, what we're looking at it. If they were to say, no, I'm not traveling, and then, you know, decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to take a trip, and they were to pass away, there would be that review in that 2-year period saying, you know, kind of looking at were they, you know, being truthful on the application at the time. Is this just a refund of premiums, or do we pay out? It'll be reviewed then. So that 2-year window, and that's common across the entire insurance industry. They always have a 2-year window where they have a look back. But, you know, if they get the policy because, you know, they're not planning to go anywhere and they go out and they come back, it's not like it's going to void the policy unless they pass away. Say like that notices, hey, they're out of the country here when this happened. So if they suddenly died in Mexico or something like that after saying they weren't leaving, then obviously it probably will return a premium than actually paying out the policy. So something to keep in mind. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, guys? Or well, let's thank you, Rob, for coming on. We appreciate all the information. If you guys have questions, please feel to reach out to Jane first and then Rob. I don't want them to get blown up with 5 billion questions. You know, I get it. And also too, if you have questions about different underwriting stuff, I'm pretty familiar with most companies, so I can probably help you out. Thank you, Rob. Your process,
Thank you.
impressed. I'm impressed because it's very simple, and simple is better for clients, and I appreciate that. And you know, I'm glad you guys all jumped on. We're gonna go ahead and end the meeting. We're gonna start our live transfer training just after, and make sure you guys please take down that phone number for Ladder, because
Yes.
once you guys are getting paid, you want to be able to check on your commissions, the status of your policies, and you can call that number. And thank you again, Rob. Do you have any other final remarks to make to the team?
Just one last thing. Obviously, you know, we're very excited to be working with all of you. So if you do have any questions or run into any issues, definitely feel free to let us know. Also, be sure to watch your email because as we kind of go through it, we're constantly innovating and trying to make this even just better and better experience for both you and your client. So we will have like additional underwriting guides and new writers coming out and stuff, and we'll be sure to notify you. So just watch for those in your email box. So, and maybe I'll come back and talk about those too. So
Thank you so much. And by the way, so he just so you guys are aware, Ladder is a platform. The insurance is actually Prosperity Life Group, correct term?
correct. Yeah, yeah. This is actually a partnership with Prosperity. So yeah, so we work very closely with them. So the whole process is ours, but Prosperity will actually be when they actually get their actual policy documents. It will say Prosperity and Ladder
So
at the
they're
top.
they're
So,
the insurer, it's underwritten through
yes.
Prosperity. Beautiful.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay, very
Yep.
nice.
Mhm.
All righty, guys. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again, Rob, for jumping on. If you guys want to do some live transfer training, I'll be taking live transfers for the next 6 hours. And let's make some money. Have a good day, guys.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.